Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the Savage Nation, on air with you with a shocking story. And this is not meant to embarrass or insult the president or Mrs. Biden. I tweeted this morning, shock. Did you know that President Biden had brain aneurysms in the 1980s? Why is the lying media hiding this? He is at risk. Both he is at risk and the nation and the world is at risk. So I tweeted that this morning, and some of the comments are very intelligent. Some of them are just foolish, as usual, on social media. But Karen, who is my ace producer, went and found an article for me that actually is quite alarming. It's terrifying, actually, when you look at it. There is a precedent for the fact that Mrs. Biden may, in fact, be Madam President. And that precedent was set many years ago when President Woodrow Wilson had had a stroke. I'm going to read you the article that she found for me from 2016, Edith Wilson as Madam President. Listen to me very carefully, please. You've not seen this on any news channel yet. I hope that you will awaken to the fact that there are those of us who know more about some things than others, and others know more about certain things than others. I know more about this than most others. I'm not the world's expert on it, but I did write a book called Reducing the Risk of Alzheimer's in 1987 when I ran the Alzheimer's Research Institute. If you think it's a joke, you can shove it, buddy, because I don't care what you think. I'm sick and tired of morons on social media thinking that by commenting they're clever. Shut up and go away, all of you. And just listen. Make believe you're in a classroom. I would throw you out if you open your mouth like a heckler. So is Mrs. Biden, Jill Biden, Madam President? This article was published in 2016. It should have disqualified Joe Biden from running since we found out in 1988 that he had had 2 brain aneurysms. That should have disqualified him from running for the presidency. But because we don't live in a democracy, we live in an autocracy run by the media and secret hands. The George Soros types are running this country. I heard every other story under the sun. Money rules. Whoever's making the money is ruling this country, whether it's the Vatican or Soros or those running the refugee camps, if you want to call them the illegal immigrant camps, or the hotel owners who are housing them, or the bastards who are feeding them, or the bastards who are clothing them. They're running this country. 2016. Author makes case for Edith Wilson as Madam President. In 1919, President Woodrow Wilson suffered a massive stroke that left him unable to fulfill the responsibilities of his office, just as the country was recovering from World War I. But instead of the vice president taking over as head of state, it was Wilson's wife, Edith, who stepped into the role, running the government under a cloak of secrecy. A new book argues that Edith should be considered not just the first lady, but America's first lady president. William Hazelgrove, author of Madam President, The Secret Presidency of Edith Wilson, joins us to talk about the woman who ran the country in secret for 2 years. And below are excerpts from the book. This is from WTTW.com back in 2016. A well-kept government secret. President Woodrow Wilson lay with his mouth drooping, unconscious, having suffered a thrombosis on October 2nd, 1919, and left him paralyzed on his left side and barely able to speak. The doctors believed the president's best chance for survival was in the only known remedy for stroke at the time, a rest cure consisting of total isolation from the world. From there, Edith Wilson would act as the president's proxy and run the White House and, by extension, the nation by controlling access to the president, signing documents, pushing bills through Congress, issuing vetoes, isolating advisors, crafting State of the Union addresses, disposing of or censoring correspondence, and filling positions. She would analyze every problem and decide which ones to bring to the president's attention and which to solve on her own through her own devices. All the while, she had to keep the fact that the country was no longer being run by President Woodrow Wilson a guarded secret. I mean, this is eerie, by the way. This is quite eerie. Many Americans are still surprised to learn that President Wilson suffered a massive stroke while in office. But what they find totally inconceivable is that his wife, Edith Wilson, was the. I'm going to have to change my camera. I'm having trouble with something right now. There we go. Much better for me. You're a legend, Michael Savage. Okay, I'm your legend. Many Americans are still surprised to learn that President Wilson suffered a massive stroke while in office. What they did find totally inconceivable was that his wife, Edith Wilson, was the acting president for almost 2 years. To acknowledge this would be to diminish Woodrow Wilson's legacy. Power is given to those who can wield it. And President Wilson, who remained in bed only to be wheeled out for movies and some fresh air, was virtually powerless. That is very frightening because Mr. Biden is being wheeled out for the occasional short soundbite. And at that, he is not doing very well. It's not very funny to say this. We all get older. We've all had parents who had Parkinson's disease or something like that, and it's horrible to witness. Let me go back to the article. The question then is, who was Edith Bowling Wilson? Was she a woman singularly gifted enough to run the country and nurse her husband back to health? Or was she a woman doing the best she could in a world in which women were seen as little more than second-class citizens? Madam President, the secret presidency of Edith Wilson. I can read more. Apparently, she was a formidable person, and she was actually up to the job. She was able to take over the affairs of the state. Now, this was a violation of secrets of state, by the way. But Woodrow Wilson wasn't a man who stood on protocol. He routinely used other people as sounding boards. Edith was a lover, confidant, and advisor all in one. Wilson probably thought he was having his cake and eating it too. He would have never imagined that he was grooming Edith Galt for his seat of power. A surprising first woman president. It was less than 2 years, but it was groundbreaking. After his stroke, he could not perform his duties as the president, and Edith stepped in to fill the role. So she took over his job. She restricted access to him. Sounds familiar. Edith's presidency fits the constitutional definitions of the duties of president. The Constitution defines the president's first role as commander-in-chief of our military. Wow. Jill Biden is the commander-in-chief. The Constitution defines the president's first role as commander-in-chief of our military. World War I had just ended, but the peace had not been settled yet. Edith was in the middle of the negotiations to get the Treaty of Versailles ratified and to implement the League of Nations with the United States as a member. Oh my God. There's much more to this. Maybe you don't believe this. How many years later is this? From that time in 1919, you do the math. It's over 100 years. Now, almost 100 years later, we're faced again with the prospect of our first woman president. Jill Biden, just as Edith Wilson, was never nominated. She was never on any ballot. She never took the oath of office. But maybe she is carrying the burden of presidential power as we speak. Maybe she should be given credit for stepping in during the nation's emergencies, which are many, and steering the ship of state through these turbulent waters. You want to give her credit? Then give her credit. You want to blame her? Then blame her, if in fact she is running the show. We have a lot to talk about. The nation has a right to know, but because we now live in a total blackout of the truth, because of CNN, ABC, CBS, and all of the other useless propaganda arms of this corrupt government with a corrupt media is now a tinderbox of peril for the nation and the world. Tell me why we are funding Ukraine when we should have knocked heads together and forced whoever is running Ukraine to negotiate with Putin and end this war before it becomes a European NATO plus US war. Tell me why this is going on. Tell me why so many other things are going on, such as the rupturing of our southern border with criminal gangs coming across the border, beating up our police, robbing stores, and running criminal enterprises. Tell me why this is going on. This is an out-of-control train wreck that's about to go over a railroad bridge that's collapsed. Again, Edith Wilson was Madam President, and nobody knew it at the time. I'm asking a question. I'm not telling you what is going on. As a longstanding member of the American media, I feel it is my obligation to do what I did today. And I hope those in the Secret Service and the other arms of the government's intelligence agencies will understand that I'm simply an American citizen asking questions. This is Michael Savage signing off. And if you want to know more about this, please go to my most recent podcast, which is Biden's Brain, America's Pain, because it is America's pain. Biden's brain is America's pain. Thank you for listening. Hit the like button, subscribe, because we're all living on borrowed time. All of us are living on borrowed time. All of us have to do the best we can while we're on this time for this great nation of ours. Ask not what your nation can do for you, but what you can do for your nation. Thank you, JFK. If only we had him again. Thanks for listening. I'll be back, God willing, with God's help and your listenership.